Hi everyone, welcome. I'm down here in my wormery, preparing to check in on my two newest worm bins. They're right here alongside me on this little makeshift shelf. They're 12 days of age now, and they've got European nightcrawler worms living in them. And what I'm prepared to feed them today is this lovely assortment of veggies. So now the worms that occupy these two systems over here, they were removed from a couple old systems that were time to be harvested, and the harvested castings I don't really treat as completely harvested until I feel like I've made a best effort to try to get the straggler worms out of the material. So in went the castings that those worms used to live in. Both bins were emptied into this tub, and then we deployed what I refer to as a bait box, trying to see if we can get the worms to round up into here. So we're going to take a quick look to see how many worms have gathered over the past 12 days in this bait box. Who knows, maybe we've got castings that I can consider as harvestable at this point. But until it's worm free, I'm going to just keep trying to bait them out. And I didn't really plan on bringing this to an end today, but we're going to check in and then we'll get to feeding the worms. So let's get to work. I've not been in here to check out how things are doing. A lot of times when I set up one of these systems, I do try to promote the drying of the material that I'm trying to convince the worms to voluntarily exit. Because as this stuff out here gets drier and drier, the worms will become less and less comfortable being in it. And it'll kind of send them on a little bit of a search to try to find something better. And lo and behold, they're going to stumble on this lovely box full of fresh bedding, damp and fed. So this was not only thrown in here with damp bedding, but we threw in some yummy morsels of food for them. I don't recall what it was, but I guess we could try to identify stuff just from their appearance. If you ask me, that looks like the skin of a tomato, which has been pretty much nibbled clean to the point where you can almost see through the stuff. So they're definitely making their way over into this material here, and it's got some good moisture content to it, so that's good. You know, I suppose we could always grab a little bit of the food that's intended for the main worm bins and just supplement what's in here since we're not hauling out today. But then again, you know, the worms could certainly just keep working that tomato down further, and there is always the bedding, naturally. They can certainly nibble away on the bedding, especially since my bedding is also made with some leaves. So in a way, this thing was fed with not only tomato, but if nothing else, also the leaves that are part of my bedding. But, you know, what the heck, we're right here. We can easily just grab anything. Doesn't matter what it is, but I'll go ahead and I'll chip off a little bit of whatever dislodges easily from this mound of frozen stuff. Looks like we managed to grab some carrot and potato and some green stuff, whatever that is, I don't know. But yeah, I don't think we need much. Whatever I can get off here on this next attempt will be the extent of what we give them. And for that matter, I was going to even dampen these shredded paper cardboard bits for them more if it seemed like it would be necessary to do so, but it doesn't seem necessary to do so. It seems to me like this material's pretty comfortable, and we got some pretty healthy, happy looking worms in here. So I think the best thing for these guys is just to leave them be. Let them continue. And now we'll just take a quick peek down within the system itself just to see how many worms we encounter. So something I usually do is take a peek under here to see if there's any worms sort of in transit, making their way through those access holes that I've created on the at the bottom of this thing. So I did grab a couple little guys there off the bottom of the container, and here's one little guy that was sort of just cruising around. So here too, a second one. So it's not too surprising for them to be like kind of right there beneath the bait box. And we might find a couple more right here below. So far, oh, here's one little guy. Not sure where he came from, but he was like kind of out on the top surface. And, you know, if we bump into any more while aerating this system, we could certainly bring them over to keep them with the rest of the gang. And before we restore the bait box, all we're going to do is take all that nice dry stuff that's been sitting out here on the surface and submerge it down into the bed, bringing up the more damp stuff from down low. And it'll definitely cause all of this stuff to sort of share the moisture that exists. That means the drier stuff will start sucking up the existing moisture that's present in the stuff that's coming up from down low, driving it to become drier and less appealing for the worms to remain in. And much easier to crumble too, you know. As the stuff starts to release its moisture content, it breaks free from being in these little balls and little clumps and starts to become a much finer material. Stuff that we could certainly even screen if we wanted to. So I found another worm here, but I'm not going to continue this as if we're really trying to pick out worms or find more. Naturally, if we do locate one, we can always just help them over into the bait box. But at this point, I think it's time to just restore the bait box, let the process continue, and I guess there's always that option for me to come back in here at some point during the week, at some point, to see how they're doing, and if we find that it's a little bit too dry in the bait box, we could always add moisture. But luckily, it's pretty well protected from drying by having this, first of all, like this nice, pretty thick layer of folded over paper. It's probably like 6 or 8 layers thick at least. And then I put this on top, which also provides a good bit of cover. This is also sometimes used as a bait box, so it's got the similar kinds of holes on it as what the big container has on its bottom surface. And just, I guess, to help limit the amount of moisture that goes through that and still might want to try to escape, it's protected with this. So the bait box is pretty well protected. Looks like we got a few worms starting to come together, but I believe it's time to set these guys aside, go get the worm bins out, and give them their yummy feast. So I'll be right back. Besides that lovely assortment of veggies that I've got for them, which you've seen already, I've got my grit. The grit that I use is pulverized eggshell. I've also got my prepared bedding, which is just a mixture of shredded paper cardboard, as well as some leaves, dampened nicely, very much like what you already saw in the bait box. It's always a good idea to include some nice bedding for the wormies. Sometimes when these top covers that I leave out for them get so worn that it seems impractical to keep them in that function as a top cover. Maybe they're in fragments and falling apart and can't be handled without going to pieces. Sometimes it's just a good idea to sort of promote those sorts of very worn pieces of material to accompany the feeding as supplementary bedding, which I believe that this stuff right here would be a good candidate for. This piece, on the other hand, would probably still hold together nicely and could be draped out again at the end of the feeding. We'll do the same with this one over here. And for whatever reason, this one has survived too. So I don't know why, but that one piece of paper over there just got really trashed. I don't know, maybe I must have had some sort of really delicious morsel of food over there for them or something. And let's see. I guess this stuff came over from the old worm bins. This stuff was sort of set up as a little bit of a partition to keep the nice castings clean, and then the material that makes up the horizontal migration feeding zone isolated. And well, almost wondering if we should just reuse a couple of those pieces of paper as supplementary beddings. The worms would probably appreciate it. There's so many nice castings floating out on the top, but you got to remember that these worms were bought over with the material that they were inhabiting in the horizontal migration feeding zones of their old bins. Lots of castings that had developed in those horizontal migration feeding zones over the weeks that were spent getting the worms to come over there and gather for haul out. So brand new bin like this, only 12 days old, not too surprising that we're going to encounter lots of pretty much intact bedding. It's nice how everything's got a good damp consistency to it, or at least moisture level to it. As far as consistency goes, I don't know, it's just your typical collection of sort of damp cardboard shreds. Nothing special about it. So, once again, I've just followed my glove to bin number 2 to begin, but now that we've already kind of excavated the place where we're going to feed in bin number 2, let's get over to bin number 1 and get them caught up. Here too, look at all those beautiful castings that have piled up since the last check-in. I guess they must like coming up to hang out underneath that plastic under which all the moisture that's in the system, it circulates and makes everything that's out on the top surface kind of damp and cozy to be hanging out in. Like more tomato bits must have been used to feed these guys when we launched the bin. That's how they were launched into here, was that the bin was already sort of pre-fed prior to the worms being introduced. And I assume it was stuff that would go quick. I mean, the tomato is obvious. Whatever else might have been fed in addition to that, I don't see any sign of. So far, at least. We might still encounter something. And this definitely looks like some sort of a leftover, but I'm actually thinking this might be some of the stuff that came over with the worms. Because I believe that asparagus was used in the horizontal migration feeding zones of the old systems that have been retired. So, yeah, a little bit of stuff that came over with the worms, a little bit of the new stuff that they were fed with. And now it's time to furnish them with feeding number 2. Pretty generous portion of all kinds of goodies. And, you know, I think the 2 most intact pieces of newspaper will just stay to remain in that function of top covering. But these 2 other ones, the one that was really torn up and then this one that also kind of tore as I was picking it up, I believe can go in as really nice seasoned bedding to supplement the more sterile and fresh bedding we're going to sprinkle in out of my collection of prepared bedding. And yeah, you're probably thinking, hey, the system's full of bedding. What do you need to add so much bedding for? Well, it's always a good idea to include a good amount of bedding. Sometimes I am pretty skimpy on the bedding. I've been trying to actually develop a habit of being a lot more generous with the stuff. So hopefully I can accomplish my objective of being more generous with the stuff that I give them. So this mound seems to have some potato peel and some cucumber peel, and maybe even some parts of cucumber that weren't really found to be as good as they could be for human consumption. And this thing here almost looks like a whole chunk of potato even. I don't always know what's in these collections of stuff that I'm giving to the worms, because a lot of it is, you know, provided. Friends, family, whoever, you know. Some people like to see about getting their kitchen scraps disposed of in the most responsible way that they can, and that's where I come in, in my wormies. And I'm sure the wormies appreciate it. I don't hear them complaining. So, we got potato, we got cucumber, we got carrot, and another thing that the worms can make use of is grit. And the grit is really just sort of a, not so much a nourishment thing, but more of a material that they utilize in their gizzards to break down the foods that they're consuming. I don't know where this little guy came from. Little spider just dropped in out of nowhere. I noticed him out of the corner of my eye. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else we need to do here, but I think we're pretty much good. My only other idea was to maybe give this cardboard that came over with the worms from their old systems a little bit more of a promotion too. It's kind of, instead of sitting out on the surface not doing a whole lot of anything, being over here right next to the food is going to give it a much greater chance of getting a lot of worm attention versus maybe not so much by just being out on the surface. So let's just take a quick peek on how things in the outer limits of the systems look, all the way on the outer edges. Not bad, but not too many worms. I guess they were sort of gravitating towards the middle. It's probably where we applied their foods last time. That's where I found the leftovers. And since that's my typical feeding location, I just sort of zeroed in on that spot by default, even though I didn't have a indicator to show where I had last fed. I was just assuming that that's where I had last fed. Now on this edge, I'm definitely seeing more worms in the material. I wonder why I didn't see too many over there on the far edge. So, well, whatever. Sometimes the worms just like a portion of the bin better for whatever reason. But it would be nice if they took a shine to the entire space that they're occupying and felt comfortable just cruising anywhere. I'm sure we'll get to that point soon, but it's still a pretty new bin. Perhaps some of the material that makes it up still needs to get broken in a little bit before the worms start to take a shine to it. And you know, I got a collection of coffee filters, I think, for these new systems. Why don't we allocate a couple of the coffee filters that I've got piled up over here to serve the function of feeding zone indicator in our newest worm bins with the European nightcrawlers. On day 12, I think they're doing quite nicely over here. Over here on this far edge, in bin number 2, I'm definitely seeing some worms over there in the material, more so than I saw in bin number 1. Well, and here, somehow the material felt just more damp as I pushed my fingers down into it. Sometimes I wonder if that sensation of pressing my fingers into something damp is actually the sensation of me just pressing my finger through a pile of little worms. The sensation definitely is similar. So you can see all these worms that are coming out with each handful. For whatever reason, they've been apparently, I guess, gravitating towards this edge of the bin, liking it better for whatever reason. I definitely see more worms on the edge of the bin closer to me. And I think just by doing what we've done here, kind of tilling stuff around and moving material around to kind of level things off, we've managed to displace a lot of worms from this edge of the bin. They're certainly free to just come on back if that's what they prefer. Nothing's stopping them. And now we can just come on in with these top coverings, which I doubt will remain in the top covering roll for much longer. They're probably going to be very close to gone, if not completely gone, by the next time we come back in here. That's my prediction. And I'm assuming that by the next time we come in here, it'll be safe to say that the castings over in the box we checked in on in the beginning, that stuff's definitely going to be, you know, completely depopulated of worms next time we check in. So we'll do the haul out of the bait box then, reunite those little guys with the system that has the fewest estimated number of worms living in it. So if you haven't done your part yet to watch the initial launch video that these two systems took part in 12 days ago when I filmed it, I will put a link to that because I invite everyone to go check it out if you haven't done so already. And I always want to know everyone's estimates for how many worms they think live in these systems. And I've already got a pretty good average coming together. The numbers are pretty close. Somewhere between 2,900 and 3,000 worms per system is the estimate. But if you haven't had a chance to provide me with your estimate, then please go check out that video and comment. And then at some point soon, we'll be adding to whichever it is the two systems that seems to have the fewer worms living in it, just to see if we could get their number up and their population estimate counts to match more closely. So that's it for the video, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. If you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.